Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sonika Garcia,
And I'm Brad Davidson, and this is Breaking the Code,
a podcast that takes the BS out of behavioral science for marketers and non-marketers alike. We hope to arm you, our listeners, with the tools you need to make sense of behavioral science and to help you apply it to your work as communication extraordinaires. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Today is our Super Bowl special. We were thinking about what topic to do for this week's episode, and it just felt like such a good fit to talk about the Super Bowl. And we're in marketing, and what did we think of the ads? And we're going to jump into it. So I've definitely heard a lot of different takes. I think from a behavioral science standpoint, it'll be interesting to get some medical anthropologist's view.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just going to split the intro this time, and we've got Gabriel on with us this week. So we're all gonna take one commercial and talk about it. Go, Gabe. But ads are interesting. They're cultural artifacts, right? To an anthropologist, ads are a product, of people working together. And they're fundamentally a big experiment in social science. That's how I always view them, because people put ads out there to change behavior. That's what they're for. Now, we can say that they're to raise awareness, but you want to raise awareness so that people then change their behavior around your product or service or whatever it is you're offering. Sometimes we advertise quit things like stop smoking, right? But we're trying to modify people's beliefs and behaviors, right? So it's interesting from a pure linguistics standpoint. There's the behavior that we've identified. There's an audience that we want to change their behavior, and we usually define that audience. And then there's this sort of experimental variable, which is the ad, right? And we then measure the impact of the ad. The stuff that has not been talked about a lot yet in all of the sort of Super Bowl ad reviews that we've seen that I think we're going to focus on today are things like the context of viewing. Super Bowl ads are different. Like being on the Super Bowl is just fundamentally different for ads. The public is different. It's a very diverse public. It's the least homogeneous ad audience you could find because it's the most watched thing on TV. And then also it's like, when are you viewing it? In what context? With whom? As Gabe has pointed out, like usually you're a couple beers in by the time you see some of these. So we're going to judge them based on what we think are the sort of like the larger purpose, which is, do they do the work that they're supposed to do? What are people trying to get done with these ads? And do we think they're going to work? So Sonika, you had more to say about that sort of context piece for sure.
Yeah, I think just adding to what you said, I always find it interesting. Well, for me at least, it's just speaking for myself, I'm going into it like I'm excited for the commercials. Whereas like when I usually watch TV, that's the worst part of it all. So I think even just people's expectations going into it, what emotional state are you in? Are you relaxed? Are you with a ton of family and friends who maybe your reaction to things are skewed when you have a certain somebody in the room next to you? Like I just think it gets really deep into like what context are we in? What are the physical and psychological cues that we as humans are interacting with when we're viewing Super Bowl ads? So yeah, I think that in and of itself. And then to your point, Brad, about the viewership and like who's in the audience. I know this year for the Super Bowl, it was, obviously the most watched. There were the most,
Thank you,
the highest
Swifties.
number. Yep, all the Swifties. And to that point, there were the highest number of younger girls and just women. So I think that too is interesting, because I know historically the ads or the viewership, it's like 45-year-old males.
Yeah, look, the fact that we view the ads with anticipation is different.
Oh, yeah,
the fact
exactly.
that the game stinks is different, right? I mean, there have been some better Super Bowls recently, but as a football fan, and I'm sure most football fans will agree, the better games are the weekend before, 2 weekends before, really. They give a week off. But the conference championships are the really good games. The Super Bowl is a very difficult game to play in because it takes forever. There's too many breaks. There's no continuity. There's no flow. There's almost no home field advantage because half of the audience aren't actually football fans. They're like stars who want to see and be seen. It's an event. It's like a totally different thing. And so the ads in that context are really sort of a display. There's a very meta-conscious sort of part of it. So, and for me, just even to start out on like a high order analysis, it's not super clear what actual behavior change objectives there are for some of these ads. So I always use this example for beer. You don't have to convince people to buy beer. People like beer. You have to convince people to buy your beer, right? So that makes sense, right? Like Budweiser is not going like, look how great beer is. They're going, look how great our beer is. Don't buy Coors, buy Bud or something like that. But the Jesus ads, the He Gets Us ads, they've caused a lot of like questions. We're not going to talk about that, but it is interesting. Go like everybody's main take, if it's not about like I don't like feet, is what are they trying to achieve with this one? I've read some really interesting articles on it, and maybe it's topic for an entirely different podcast, way too long here. But if you think of ads as behavior change instruments, it's not clear from many of those ads what the behavior was. So I think rather than dive into what's the mysterious agenda or something, we're just going to look at the ads as ads.
Okay, so let's jump into it.
So I actually did pick
Yes.
the health one. So like
you
we don't
love
have to pick
you
a
just
health
love
one,
it so
but
much.
I
You can't
picked
get away.
Here's to science, right? So this was the Pfizer one. This was the one where they have Galileo and Copernicus, and they're using Queen as it's described in Wikipedia. So Wikipedia updates immediately the list of Super Bowl ads when the Super Bowl is done. And they describe it as various paintings, sculptures, and photographs of members of the science community lip syncing to Queen's song, Don't Stop Me Now. So that is exactly what the ad is. It's an AI sort of thing. You get, busts singing, Don't Stop Me Now. And the punchline is let's keep going, right? Like let's keep going on this wave of science. Now, I've heard a lot of critiques of what the ad was for, including things like, are Pfizer trying to claim that Copernicus was theirs? I don't think that's what the ad was for. I'm entirely certain, with no data, but 100% intuition and having worked in the industry for a long time, this ad is actually a corporate ad for Pfizer to try and get people to remember that science is a force for good in our lives. That during pandemic, trust in scientists and medical science and people representing medical science actually became very politicized. And a lot of people don't trust, quote, science anymore. And so it's really about Pfizer claiming the mantle of that kind of scientific progress. Science as we think of it, the scientific method starts with the Renaissance, more or less. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, right? So they go all the way back to sort of the beginning of the scientific revolution, and they say we're the inheritors of that. That's what this ad is for. And what it's supposed to do, I think, is really address the science skeptics out there to go, don't mistrust everything that science tells you, because the phone that you're using to sort of tweet your friends about how bad science is, like that's the product of science. And so my challenge with that is I don't know if that's the right audience or time. I mean, I do think it's the right audience, right? This is a broad message like, hey, none of us have polio. Isn't that great? That's an everybody message. But I think the idea that you're going to get skeptics to suddenly believe that science matters because you put an ad on the Super Bowl, that's definitely not going to happen. And I don't think they thought it would.
Right. And what did you think, Brad, about the music and like the overall tone of it? Because I think with science and like pharma commercials and those sorts of like future of science and appreciating technology and those kind of ads, they tend to, I don't know, at least the ones that come to mind most readily, they're very like, I don't know, there's like a slower music behind it. It's more of this like calming, like inspirational sort of vibe. And I felt like this was very upbeat. It had humor to it. It was a different approach.
It was a good, so this is where it's interesting. It's a good ad in the sense that it's compelling and entertaining, but being compelling and entertaining to no particular end is a lot of money to spend, right? So what did they achieve? They definitely achieved putting Pfizer in front of people. They definitely achieved connecting Pfizer to science, but I don't think it's a lack of connection to science that's the problem. I think the problem is a lack of ethics, a lack of perceived ethics, right? And that's where it gets tricky, because science has no inherent ethics. You can scientifically improve something that's terrible, like slavery or whatever you want, right? I mean, the German army in World War II had some of the most advanced, products that science and engineering could create. science has no inherent ethics. It's a methodology for figuring out the natural world and building new things within it. And so I'm not so sure that telling people that Pfizer stands for science helps when the major split right now is between science and culture or religion or something like that. That there seems to be a cohort of people who go, my religion is science, and a cohort of people who go, my religion is independent of science, and my beliefs, we talked about this for Gardasil. My beliefs are fundamentally about morality, not data. And I don't think, unless it's to sort of make people who are involved in the sort of march of science feel good that there's an ad, I just don't know what a measurable KPI would be. I mean, basically they land on like, let's all fight cancer. Like, yep, that's exactly what we all want to do. None of us are on the pro cancer side of this fight. So I just, again, I'm not trying to like slam it, because I think from a creative standpoint, from an execution standpoint, it's incredibly well done. It's incredibly entertaining. I've watched it a bunch of times, but I just don't know what behavior they're trying to change, frankly. And so it's a lot of money to spend to get your name out there for not clear what you're going to have as a behavior on the outside. So to me, this one's a miss. It's interesting. It's fun. Corporate ads for pharma are tough anyway, because nobody buys Pfizer. They buy Pfizer products, unless you're talking about the stock. And I don't think this was a stock market ad either. So look, I could be totally missing it, but I've watched it a lot. I just don't know what they're trying to achieve, other than make people feel good that Pfizer has inherited the history of scientific innovation, and that if we're into science, we should be into Pfizer. Like, okay, I get it.
One of the things I think about, just like the goal of Super Bowl ads in general, I know that, as we were saying at the top, like, people look forward to the ads in Super Bowl unlike any other time of the year. So I wonder how much brands try to level up their execution, or how much they produce their ads with the goal of just entertainment in mind. Because Brad, I agree with you that it was very entertaining to watch the singing faces and it whirling through, even though there were a cast of people that I didn't know off the top of my head. I got the sense that we're celebrating science here. I just don't know exactly where it measured up to from results on the other end, KPI perspective.
Right? Like, I don't know what I'm going to measure. Do people feel better about science? Now, I feel pretty good about science when I think about it. But again, I think there's also this whole idea that like science is a new religion. People have, and this is a whole different podcast, right? But when you listen carefully to the language that people use around science right now, they believe in science. They have faith in science. They believe that science will come up with a solution, and they have faith that science is somehow going to, cure whatever ails us at some point. Like, there is a sort of wholesale shift for a lot of non-church going people, that they believe in something, and that something is science. And that to me is interesting, because again, there's no ethical framework around science. It's a methodology. Our ethics, the ethics that we bring to science tell us that we shouldn't do certain things or should do certain things. But famously, we're like wading into deep genetic science right now. There's a lot of ethical quandaries there that you can't answer with science. You have to answer them with ethics, and those come from initially a religious framework. So, it's all very complicated, but again, entertaining, not sure what it's for. I bet the people who made it feel great about it, because it's a really well put together ad, but like as a behavior change instrument, it's a miss. I would give this a passing grade, only because I'm willing to admit I don't actually understand what it was trying to do.
I will say, I think you made an important point early on, and that was the subtle reminder of like everything that we use, even if you're someone who doesn't necessarily turn to science first in your beliefs, is a result of science. And I feel like maybe it's not like a outright like this is the behavior to change, but maybe it's more of like a subtle like attitude change for the
Right.
people, obviously not the three of us on this call, but those who maybe turn to science second or third, or are skeptical when it comes to certain elements of science. I definitely know people like that in my life. So I wonder if it's like a, hey, just in case you forgot, science is everything and the foundation of everything that you believe in too.
I think that's probably right. I think probably what they're trying to do is change the sort of environment within which they're working to remind people to like be positive towards science. I just don't know if the Super Bowl is
Yeah,
the right
fair.
place to remind people of that. So,
Yeah.
let's for the moment say that that's exactly what they're trying to do, that uptake of every one of their products is challenged by an anti-science bias. Well, then is this the most efficient way of getting people to look differently at science? Because again, it's probably more the ethics than the actual products or their capabilities that people are giving pause to. Tuskegee wasn't about we didn't understand the sciences, we were unethical. So I think that's the challenge. But anyway, I don't want to beat this one up too much.
Yeah.
I'm a big
No,
Pfizer
that's
fan.
fair.
I'm a
Yep.
big ad fan. I am not anti-ad. I'm just saying I think this is one of those ones where when you put it together, I'm not sure what it was achieving. That said, let's move on to one that we all really loved. Sonika, why don't we talk about the It's a Hard Knock Life by Dove, which is yet another catchy tune.
Annie was one of my favorite movies growing up, so I definitely my ears perked up when this one came on. Yeah, so as Brad mentioned, this is the Dove. It's a Hard Knock Life ad, and it basically, for those of you who maybe haven't seen it or missed it, the ad sort of starts off by showing these clips of young girls playing sports and having, sort of mishaps. So tripping, falling off of the gymnastics beam. It's playing this song and it's showing all these images, right? And then it quickly cuts to a girl looking at herself in the mirror, kind of in a self-conscious sort of way, or she's just really looking at herself. And the whole purpose of the campaign is to basically shine light on low body confidence, being a reason that girls end up quitting sports for the age of 14. So, which honestly, having been a girl in sports, having a daughter, like it makes total sense. But they then put like a stat on the screen, which is 45% of girls quit sports by 14 because of low body confidence. And it's a very high number. And it was shocking to me first seeing it. And then obviously thinking about it, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense. And it's the brand's first body positive Super Bowl ad in 20 years. They have other beauty efforts and that sort of a thing, but this is their first body positive specific ad that they played in the Super Bowl. So I thought that was interesting to learn as well. And, the whole purpose and the call out by the end of it was showing a girl then, diving into the swimming pool with sort of maybe like a different step to her, not so afraid, in her bathing suit, and basically saying like, it's on us, it's on the coaches. And at first when I heard coaches, I was like, coaches? I mean, parents too, but the way that Dove ends up defining coaches as parents, anyone who's sort of involved in the life of these young girls when they're doing sports. And it's a call to action to like learn more about what we can do as parents, as coaches, as teachers to help girls with improving their body confidence so they don't end up quitting sports. So that's the background of it. I actually had to watch it a couple of times. I feel like every time I watch it, I kind of see something different, something else sticks out to me. So we can get into that. But I think the first thing that came to mind for me, just because it's an example that we use so much in our work, is the Scottish women's rugby team. They were having their uniform was white shorts, and then they asked for blue shorts because, well, what do you do when you're on your period and you're not comfortable wearing white shorts?
To sort of clarify that, away uniforms are always white, and white shorts just weren't working for it turns out it's the entire women's professional league asked for blue or black shorts, and they got them.
Was it the Australian volleyball team or the UK volleyball, like, changing the outfit for volleyball players, beach volleyball players, from the swimsuit bottoms to shorts. And we've seen a lot of examples, like adult women on teams really advocating for these different uniforms because of different body issues that women face. So I think that came to mind of like, yes, this needs to start even younger. We shouldn't be in a situation where finally at the age of like, late 20s, early 30s, women are speaking up and feeling like they can ask for it. That shouldn't even be happening.
Because they've already made it through to the other side. And just to sort of step in on that for 1 second, like we've talked about this, and I think we talked about even doing a podcast episode on it, but historically, women's uniforms for sport have been incredibly revealing And when you watch, for example, A League of Their Own, they make them wear short skirts. It's like, those are terrible to play baseball in. When my kids were going through high school, they call what they make the girls wear on track runderwear, because it's basically a pair of underwear. A lot of girls quit. They don't want to be running around on the field in underwear, and they shouldn't have to. The dudes get to wear like regular old shorts. And so there's been a move recently to go back to like, why are we making them wear this stuff? And the most cogent analysis was, we used to think of women athletes as so much inferior to men that if you're going to have to watch bad athletes, at least you get to watch them half naked, which is probably exactly why we did it. And it is the most depressing thing that I've heard. But I'm glad we're sort of turning it around now and giving people the bodily autonomy to wear what they want when they're doing sports. So anyway, yeah, I think that's part of the backdrop. And I thought the bathing suit, like picking at the bathing suit, was really interesting then, because that's one where you really aren't going to end up in a baggy bathing suit. Like they're not streamlined. So the bathing suit one is just, you're going to be in a bathing suit. But anyway, back to you.
Yeah, but I have many ideas of, different kinds of bathing suits that could be given to girls to make them feel more comfortable. Like I think people think like, oh, a one piece is enough, but no, like they're tight. They're tight in weird areas. Like it's very uncomfortable. So I think that there's definitely opportunity there too. But what I think is so important for brands, and we also talk about this, and I know we're kind of like all over the word like authentic, but when it comes to honesty, authenticity, being consistent as a brand, like these are all things that a brand needs to embody to, obviously connect with their consumers. And then that's first before even thinking about changing any sort of behavior or initiating any sort of behavior. And what I love about Dove that I've seen them do repeatedly year after year is their focus on young girls. So I know they had this I forget what it was called. It was not self-esteem, but like they did like a social media, like hateful comments that girls are exposed to, and they read them with their mothers, which I, thought that was great. They're always kind of shining the light on like the important developmental years for girls. And I think we do see body confidence, body positivity, movement and commercials, but they're always geared towards an older group, like 18 plus, at least when you think about like swimsuit, underwear, or, period commercials, like they're all skewed a little older. And I never understood why, because young girls are facing these same exact things, when do you start your period? You don't start your period when you're 20 years old. So like, I always found that weird. And I love that Dove takes a stance and has taken this stance repeatedly with young girls.
Yeah, I think there's some, to your point, I think there's some brand authenticity here in that this is not the first time Dove has stepped out and said we should really support women and be body positive. In fact, famously, the Campaign for Real Beauty sort of kicked off a whole reevaluation of representation in beauty ads. It's the Dove Self-Esteem Project, right? The hashtag is hashtag keep her confident.
Yeah.
I think they've been trying to address this a lot. No, they're not the only ones. I sometimes get confused between who's sponsoring what. Always has also sponsored some things. But to your point, like they've been consistent. This is not suddenly something that they've decided they're going to do. It's not like when Gillette said, we're going to be a positive role model for men. It's like, well, you were kind of toxic for a really long time. It's a bit of a pivot. For them, I think, if nothing else, the ad felt very genuine. Like their concern felt very genuine. It felt to me like this is really coming from a place of, sure, it's a commercial entity, but they're trying to do good, and I applaud them for that. So what's the behavior here? Like, let's get into the social science stuff. Like, is this a good instrument for behavior change?
Yes. So I think it's twofold. I think the one behavior obviously is just get out and buy more Dove products, right? When you're thinking about what body wash, if you don't have like strong brand loyalty to like one type if you're like me, basically, like I like to try different brands, and I've used Dove and then I'll go to something else and I'll, go back to Dove. So I guess it's, use our brand for your health needs. That's obviously the one piece of it. And I think anyone who maybe is not currently using a Dove product, if they were moved by this campaign, surely when they're in the store and they see a Dove product, they might reach for it. Like I know I would. So I think that's probably the low-hanging fruit.
It's like the beer thing, right? People need soap. And so
Exactly.
it's buy my soap. It's not, hey, think about soap. You might want to use some soap, pal. Like it's much more of, when you're buying soap, which soap are you going to buy? Dove is the better option kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes. I think the other piece of it, 'cause I think a lot of times and I don't know if many people did this, but I'm always curious, like, okay, you're shining light on this issue, which is great. You're doing so in an authentic, meaningful, honest way, which is great. But like, what do we do next? Like, if I'm interested in helping, a young girl that I know, or my daughter, or if I'm a coach or whatever it may be, like, where do I go? What's the next step? And I feel like that's really the important behavior here too, like making it very easy to find the resources that they're claiming that you can potentially find. And I've seen a bunch of brands, they'll say, check out our page for resources about XYZ, and you go on their page, none of the links work. The resources are like just basic, very basic. They're not very like helpful at all. And you kind of just think like, this is it. And you just move on. Whereas Dove, I did go on their website. I did look at the resources that they have and their collaborations with other organizations. And they have a ton of downloadable information. I mean, curriculums, like lessons, like 9, 10 lessons on, for coaches and parents on how to have certain conversations, things to keep in mind, printouts, like everything. It's health literate. It's easy to understand. There's vibrant colors. It's fun to look at. I didn't see that it was necessarily like segmented. I think they could probably do a lot more with it. And I'm sure that they will. At least that's the hope. But I think that as a resource, at least just baseline, they definitely put a lot of information out there. They put their money where their mouth is, and they put that stuff out there for people to look into, which I thought was great. And I hope that the larger behavior is that parents and coaches do find the resources and actually have these conversations, because that's, I think, more than even purchasing their products, it's people aren't having this conversation enough. I think for me it was a success. And like, having looked into it and done I think that they did what they needed to do. And there's also, I'm sure, unlike maybe the Pfizer effort, there's more of like, clear KPIs that, could be in place to measure success, which I'm sure they're doing too. So,
yeah, look, in some ways, the Pfizer problem is more brand related, right? Like Pfizer has an uptake problem because of a lack of scientific belief right now by certain, segments of the population, vaccines in particular, right? Nobody is against curing cancer. Nobody, well, trolls might be, but aside from trolls, nobody's against girls having confidence. So I think in some senses, it's sort of like advertising peace, happiness, and, motherhood, apple pie kind of stuff. But in some senses, I think you're right. I think Dove has done its own brand a nice sort of polish up, which is what a good Super Bowl ad should do. I think it's a huge audience. Everyone buys soap. Most people know a girl. So it's a pretty good use of the audience, I think, too.
And I think one last thing, and not to be like, and what they could do better, but I think the one thing, and hoping that they'll build on this and there'll be other campaigns and whatever, the girls that they actually are showing in the commercial, to me, appear younger. Like I would say definitely younger than 12, let's say. But I know you can't really tell, but like I just, that's how it came off.
Yeah, I make it a point
me.
of not guessing girls' ages ever.
Yeah, but like,
wrong.
just from, what I know, it seems like they were probably younger than 12. I do think that this is obviously an issue, as I said, like up to 14. I would argue up to 18 and beyond, right? Like I think that every woman, all ages kind of feel this issue. But I think maybe showing, because if you think about it, I don't think an 8-year-old is necessarily like watching this ad. And so for them, it's targeting their parents. And I understand that. I do think, though, there's an opportunity to show more of like what a 14 or 15-year-old girl actually will look like in certain sports uniforms, and like their the way that their bodies have changed, and like that discomfort, which they do show a little bit more on their website. So I think I would probably have liked to see that more, so it could have resonated more with like the 14-year-old who's watching, because they're definitely watching, right? More so than a 7 or 8-year-old. So
that's interesting. See, I think it was for the parents and all the rest of us who are guilty of making them feel bad.
I think that's mostly it, right? Like I think that it was mostly for them. That was the primary audience, but I definitely think the secondary audience was the actual girls themselves, and to be open to having these conversations with your coaches and feeling acknowledged. I don't want to get like too deep into it, but like I'm not a quitter. These feelings that I have are not. They're valid.
No validation
this is a thing.
of your.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
validation exactly. So
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So 1-for-1, right? I think Dove we're high on. We think this from a behavioral science standpoint probably did some good for the brand. Pfizer one, jury's out. Good commercial. Not really clear if it's going to do the work it was supposed to do. Gabe, I heard you trying to break in, which is always
Gabe,
hard with me and Sonika. You've got
oh
one
God,
as well.
Everyone's probably like, let Gabe speak. We're sick of you two.
Yeah.
Quick thing about Dove before we go into the last example. I really like how the commercial actually shows like girls playing sports and then like failing. It's not to say that this confidence comes from like they're lesser athletes or they can't handle the tough sides, the parts that won't make the TikTok or the Instagram reels or Sports Center. It's something else entirely that's moving them away from sports. Not sports itself is not a fit for girls.
Yeah, no, that's really like such an important point, because I think that's what they were trying to show. Like it's not the knocks, the falls, the failures of the game that keep girls from playing. It's what's going on in their minds. Even if they're the best athletes, they're still potentially could quit playing because of the body confidence or lack thereof. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Thanks, Gabe. Okay, cool. 1-for-1. Gabe, what do you have for us?
So one of my favorite commercials, one of the standout ones from the Super Bowl for me, was the Google Pixel 8 commercial. It's called Javier in Frame. Google has kind of built a tradition of doing Super Bowl commercials around the Pixel, the phone. They did Scene on Pixel in 2022 that focused on how their camera is able to take pictures of darker skin, which turned out to not go so well, actually. And then in 2023, they did Fixed on Pixel, which is just being able to remove blemishes or mistakes or accidents from your previously taken pictures. It was my favorite last year too, because I thought it was pretty funny. This one wasn't as funny, but I liked it just the same. Brand wise for this commercial, I felt like it was very Google, which is purposely simple. But again, we were talking before about the experience of watching the Super Bowl. And it was a nice break, I felt like, from the celebrities and the chuckle funny stunts and the more obvious attempts for a brand to be entertaining. It tells the story of Javier, who's a visually impaired man, and he's taking these accurate pictures now of different moments in his relationship with his Black partner. And basically the story is that with the assistance of Google's AI, it's able to help Javier adjust his camera properly, so he's able to capture these important moments in his life. And so I do have a few things that I liked about this commercial. I had an hour-long conversation about it with my brother too, and just more and more things are revealing themselves from what, again, is like a very simple commercial, probably something that doesn't stand out as much if it's not shown on the Super Bowl, as a juxtaposition to all the big celebrity stunts and all the jokes. And one of the things I liked about the commercial so much was that the brand benefit was built into each part of the story, but it was built out in a way where it wasn't like in your face. Javier was taking pictures with, again, his Black partner, showing that the AI and the camera is able to detect darker skin. He was taking pictures with his dog. It can detect animals. And they had a child, him and his Black partner, which was the emotional climax of the commercial. And the camera was able to detect the baby's face too. So again, brand benefit is built out through every part of the ad, but it's not overtly pressed in your face. Another thing that I think it did really well, and this is more to behavior and attitudes, is that it navigated the mention of AI very well. This was about an AI feature in a camera. And, you hear Google, Meta, Microsoft, other tech giants are trying to really sell these novel technologies of AI and VR to people. But everybody, Gen Z included, the youngest adult generation right now, kind of sees it as unnecessary, unknown, I'm not sure about it, or just scared of it entirely. Think robot takeover, right? I felt like this ad didn't draw much ire from people. It was an ad about an AI feature that was generally accepted. So when thinking about how effective it was as far as selling a phone, I don't think it was particularly different from most cell phone ads, which focus on their camera for some reason. I think it did that trope well. Rather, they played the long game here. People's approaches and people's attitudes about AI are such of what I said before. I think robot takeover again.
Right.
And with this AI feature, it's like it's something that I can actually incorporate into my life, which is basically the message they've been trying to say about AI and VR. It just never quite lands properly.
You know, typically, like to your point, one of the things that I think is always interesting in these phone ads is the phones are the phones are the phones are the phones, right? Like they do what we need them to do. Do they connect me to Google? Yes. Do they connect me to, you know, my whatever, my Facebook, my whatever, you know, LinkedIn, whatever it is? Yeah, they all do that. So it comes down to things like how's the screen, how's the camera, how's the, you know, how's the battery life, which we don't really care about much anymore because they're all pretty good. But, you know, so how do you make that feature, that new differentiated feature where 99% of the phone's functionality is identical to every other phone? How do you make this feature sort of stand out? I think they did a nice job storytelling to make the feature actually become a story, not just like, well, we have 6 cup holders and they only have 4 cup holders in their minivan kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like it was a good narrative around what this feature represents to users, which I thought was great. I mean, I actually typically don't like feature-based advertising. I think it's trying to make something out of nothing sometimes, but this one actually made something. I thought it was good.
I thought it was really thought-provoking too. One of the conversations I had with my brother, he asked me, so Javier is taking these pictures. He's visually impaired though. So what exactly is Javier going to do with these pictures? It was a bit of a moment where we were like, well, what exactly is he going to do with those pictures? But after talking it through a bit more, we kind of realized that we weren't asking exactly the right question. I think the value is exactly what the commercial was showing. And Brad, you were saying, Javier is taking these pictures. Like, what's the value of that, to participate in that activity, to be part of the family experience? I think that it's something that was like, it was illuminating to me, is like, as far as a health experience, as far as thinking about the lives of people holistically, and not just as if, and as ads do sometimes, just depicting them as sad and what they're missing and what they're without. I feel like it provided hope.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I'm just like weird, and I probably am, but like I feel like I definitely find more excitement in like the picture taking process. Like I don't, yeah, do I look at them? Sure. Like if I'm showing someone, but like I'm not really someone who's like looking at pictures all the time, but I love taking them. And I think that even with kids, it's like, you know, the joy of being able to take their picture. I don't know. So I totally see that. It's like, you know, being blind or having any sort of impairment, I think it removes a lot of opportunities from your life. It's about the fact that the brand is thinking, what can we do to still add value and make this person's life more meaningful without, yeah, necessarily, okay, he can't like look at the picture, but like, I don't know, just thinking outside of the box, like, yeah, the act of taking the picture, the act of being able to participate in something that people take for granted, I think was really powerful to me.
I totally agree. And it's funny because as my brother and I were talking, we're fake tough guys. So we were like, oh, what's the value of taking a picture? Who cares about taking a picture? But we're the same people who every time it's a family birthday, we're all trying to get everybody around the cake and taking a picture. Every holiday, every Christmas, you know, it's important to at least capture these moments. The action of capturing them is significant too on its own.
I completely agree. And I mean, I think sometimes it's insanely dysfunctional, and I'm using insanely here in a metaphorical way, not an actual like crazy person way. But how many times do people actually rewatch the videos of the concert that they took videos of? I have to believe it's almost never. You know, we've become obsessed with sort of recording things that we never go back and look at the recordings. And the reason I'm so hyper aware of that is because I'm the one who keeps telling people don't record all your interviews because you're never going to go back and listen to them. If you didn't pay attention while you were talking to them live, you're not going to magically pay more attention to them when you listen to the recording. It's an okay backstop, but unless you're doing like detailed transcription analysis, take the notes in real time. Pay attention the first time, you know, like that's where the real data are coming from anyway. I think we
Yeah.
have this obsession with taking pictures as almost like a recording our lives. And do we go back to them? I don't know. My dad just handed me 30,000 images on a stick, literally 30,000. There's a whole lifetime full of images. I'm like, I want to go through them. I don't know when I'm going to have time to go through them. So I will, but I'm just saying, I think, you've really captured something there, Gabe, with the idea that like, it's the act. It's the connectivity between the photographer and the subject of the photograph that is the meaningful moment. We talked about this for Polaroid. There's something about that, like, I'm going to take a picture of you, you take a picture of me kind of stuff. Like, you get to participate in that archival moment, capturing the moment, as it were. So I thought it was a beautiful ad. I really did. But I'm sorry, I slightly cut you off there yet again, Sonika. So go ahead.
No, I think what I was gonna say is just like when we think about like the application and like, okay, what did the brand do right? And like thinking about strategy, right? Like we're strategists at the end of the day. So I can't help but think in that with that lens. We talk a lot about like the ecosystem of a person. So like looking in how do you actually find the moments that matter to someone? It's not by always looking at this like perfect linear journey, but rather like their entire ecosystem that makes up like their whole life and their entire day to day, and things that might seem a little bit removed from the brand, like immediate brand interaction, could give us a lot of learnings about someone to then be able to connect with them in a meaningful way, blah, blah, blah. We talk about that a lot. And I think that's what Google did a really good job of when they were developing strategy for this, is they had to have mapped out in a very intricate way, like all of the moments, the emotional moments, the connections with various people in someone's life, and to really be able to like, I don't know, capture that insight of like, it's the act, it's not the result. And like picture taking, I mean, I know we're talking about like a phone, and so like obviously, but like I just think that it's the learning the holistic ecosystem and the whole person sometimes feels like, oh, this is a waste of time. We try to get really to like, where is the brand interacting, where can the brand interact, blah blah blah. But I think taking more of a zoomed out view is what gives us the strategy to develop creative like this. So
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that in terms of saying if it's a win or not, I'd say this one is a win. It's not necessarily for cell phone ads in general, but as far as storytelling as an advertisement, as changing sentiment towards AI, which is a bit of an inevitability, I'd say that the Google Pixel ad was a win. And also, just something that occurred to me is like these pictures can be shared with other people. Brad, you were talking about the 30,000 pictures that your dad shared with you, but there's social media that exists as well.
oh yeah, totally. Like that's such a
Right.
good point. You were able to take the picture, and now you're also able to participate in picture sharing, which yes, I know with like family shared albums, and my family is big on that too, and I'm guilty of not always looking at all of them, but yeah, like you're able to be a part of it, and that is a
Listen, I
huge
think my
win.
children have blocked me. I'm going to be very honest. I send them too many photos of the family dog or something like that. But, it's cameras are so central to the ownership of cell phones right now. That's why, in answer to the question that Gabe, you asked right at the very beginning, you don't know why they're always showing the cameras. I think it's because they're so central to the ownership of the phone. It is having a camera in your pocket at all times. You never miss a shot anymore. You don't have to pay to get the film developed, so there's no barrier to entry. Anyway, all right, so we've got 3 commercials. We've got Pfizer, we've got Dove, and we've got Google. I'm not going to ask which ones we liked best because it's not about like and dislike. This is much more about, do we think they did the job? So let's just do a final vote. Do we think the Pfizer ad achieved some meaningful behavior change or set the conditions for behavior change in some meaningful way that will improve the chances of their products being used?
Oh gosh. Listen, I don't think
No one's going to put you in jail. You can say whatever you
no, I
want.
know. I think it's what I said earlier. I think it's like, I do think that there's potentially an attitude shift they might have accomplished in some people. And I think attitude obviously does change behavior. So again, it wasn't like people are going to run out and get a vaccine if they weren't going to before. I think it might just be like an attitude overall about like science. But yes, when it comes to like the brand specifically, I don't know if there was necessarily like a behavior change that will happen. But
unless it's to improve morale inside of Pfizer, I don't think it's going to achieve whatever goal it set for itself. It's a good ad. I'm not saying that, but it good in the sense of, did it do the work? I don't think so. Gabe, what do you think?
I think that I really like the energy of the ad. Don't stop me now. I like the defiance of it, but I'm just curious if it was the right, like you were saying earlier, Brad, right audience, right time, right circumstances. I'm curious about that.
Okay, so next one is the Dove campaign. Do you want to sort of summarize what you think it was for briefly and whether or not you think it did it? And then Gabe and I can weigh in, Sonika.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would love to hear what you guys think. I think it did. I think it raised not brand awareness, but maybe brand loyalty. I think it potentially got people to switch over. There was definitely an emotional connection. We know how important emotion is when it comes to changing behavior. And I do think that the resources that they have are very usable. And I think people hopefully will use them, because I don't think there are many other resources out there in that specific category. So yes for me. What about you guys?
Me too. I don't know if they'll use the resources. We historically know that whatever resources you put out there in that way, unless there's some structured way to get them into people's hands, it's hard to see them getting used properly, but they do get used. I'm just saying. But for the brand itself, I absolutely think it did the brand some good, some material, measurable good. I think they will see an increase, a typical increase. I don't mean typical, but I mean within the typical time frame, they will see a brand impact. I think this ad actually worked for that. Gabe, what do you think?
I am still struck by how at the beginning of the commercial, how they showed all those fails. I think that was like just so striking for the message that they were trying to tell entirely. How the confidence doesn't come from being an athlete, how it comes from something else entirely. It's a yes for me.
It does good for girls in sport too, right?
Totally.
Like I think it's part of a much larger initiative that seems to be gaining momentum to really provide women the opportunity for highly competitive sports all throughout their lives and sort of address some of the issues that are specific to women, like please don't make us wear white shorts on national TV in our away uniforms because it gives us anxiety. So, I think this one was good on a number of levels. I think it really did what it was supposed to do. So we're all in on the Dove one. And then finally, Google, the yet another feature ad from Google, but that actually sort of took the feature and turned it into something more meaningful. What do you think, Gabe? Is it gonna help Google?
I think it's going to help Google. I don't know how much it's going to help phone sales for Google, just because the idea of buying a phone based solely off the camera is a foreign concept to me personally. But I think as far as like the future of technology, Google has helped the future of technology as far as people becoming more comfortable with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I literally exactly that. I totally agree. I think that when we're thinking about phones, probably not, because we know what that competitive space looks like. But I think in every other way that Gabe just described, I agree.
So this was a commercial that will help AI, but not Google.
I mean, it'll help Google as like a like the brand, the phone, probably not. But I think just in like being advanced and thinking about things in a way that people have not thought about. And yes, using AI, people are afraid of AI. So I don't know. It was interesting. Like, I think Google is just a brand of like innovation, and like more than anything, I think that's enough for them. The phone, I don't know. I think I know like one person that has a Google phone. So
I think that's the challenge. I think no matter how good the ads are, I think they have a structural problem, but it's not a market I'm familiar enough with to be able to say that a good ad is going to be enough to turn around a sort of bad market share, as it were. But I think it was a good ad. I do think it will make people consider that phone. And so if there's I just don't know the demographics here, but if there's a lot of people who actually walk into the store unsure of what kind of phone they're going to buy, then yeah, this ad will have an effect. In my world, everyone knows what phone they're going to buy before they even get to the store. So I don't know how much, impact at the moment of choice we can have.
100%. I also think that, I mean, I don't know, like forget about the brand for a second, but I think even just their approach and like what we were talking about, like the moments that matter to people that are living with, blindness and just
right,
sparking a larger interest or appreciation for things that we take for granted, or people that are, don't have those physical impairments. So I think at the very least, like, that is huge, and it might not have an effect on the brand necessarily, but it will surely have an effect in other ways, just from like an awareness standpoint and appreciation standpoint. So like, that's always a win, I think, too.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily make money.
Yeah, and I was just thinking back to the Pfizer ad. We did have a conversation with people earlier in the week, and one of the things they were saying as they saw those scientists was like, well, now I feel like I don't know something. Now I feel like I'm missing something. I think with the Google Pixel ad, I didn't know about the lives of the visually impaired, but I was more curious about it than just feeling dumb.
Yeah, I'll say
exactly.
this. Those last two commercials that we talked about, the Dove one and the Google one, there's no question from a corporate social responsibility standpoint. Actually, really all three of them, they're all making points that we agree with, right? Nobody's coming out and going, I don't know, like whatever, like green fuel is terrible, whatever. That's a terrible example. You know what I mean? Like, we're behind the idea that science works. We're behind the idea that girls deserve to be encouraged in sport. We're behind the idea that people with handicaps, if new technology can aid them engaging in the world and participating fully socially in the world. We're behind all three of those things. These are good ads, and they probably furthered that. I think we're really talking about the specifics of a commercial aspect to the ad. It's harder to see the different ways forward on that. But again, Super Bowl ads are their own thing. The Super Bowl is its own thing. It's not the world's best game. It's not representative of typical ads. They get way more attention. People are primed to watch them. You actually have people not wanting to get up from their seat to go get chips because they want to watch the commercials, and in some ways they skip parts of the game, especially the people that don't like the game. So, it's interesting every year to go through the Super Bowl ads. They represent a very specific genre, let's say, sort of like con ads represent a specific genre. I don't know if they live well outside of the Super Bowl context, but we just wanted to put our own behavioral science sort of lens on it. I think from a sporting standpoint, no brainer. The Dove ad hits an audience who's primed for sports when everybody's involved in sports, and it's not just the sort of testosterone-y football addicts, or, lots of girls watch football too, but I'm just saying, like, it's a different audience. I think for Google, same thing, like a general consumer ad absolutely makes sense. Again, I don't have a solution for Pfizer. I'm not trying to beat them up. I think they did a great ad. I just don't know if that's the right audience, the right time, the right message, the right everything. But they'll know better than I do what they were trying to achieve, and they might have achieved it 100%. So, as a trio of social scientists, that's our point of view. It's not really aesthetic so much as it is functional. I often talk when I teach, like, brands do lots of things. They're structural, like, what is a brand? In this case, it's functional. Like, functionally, did these ads achieve an end? And I think they all do to a certain degree. There's two of them clearly we thought that did better, but we'd love to hear from you guys. We could be 100% wrong in your mind. So always open to that feedback. And I think this is as good a time as any to wrap it up. So I'm Brad Davidson.
I'm Sonika Garcia.
And I'm Gabriel Allen Cummings.
And this was Breaking the Code.
This is Breaking the Code. Thanks for listening.
We got to work better on the three-person outro.
Anyway. I didn't know we were doing three people.
We are doing three people game.
There are three of us.
You're here.
Right, but you guys never say it in unison when it's just the two of you.
We didn't mean to. We stepped on each other's lines.
Right. Perfectly. So it worked out. Breaking the Code is a podcast created and produced by Havas Health and Use Medical Anthropology Department. Hosted by Brad Davidson and Sonika Garcia. Content and post-production audio editing done by Gabriel Allen Cummings. And inspiration from all of you. Thank you for listening and for your continued support. If you enjoy these episodes, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a rating, subscribe, and send us a message to our mailbox at medicalanthropology@havas.com. Until next time.